Good morning and welcome to Wild Wednesday here at the Kansas City Zoo. I'm your host, Allison, and I'm here with Sean this morning. Oh, I love this building so much. It doesn't smell like people think it does. It is a little cold, but that's okay because it is perfect viewing for penguins. People love penguins, Sean. I don't know if you knew that.
Everybody loves penguins.
Everybody loves penguins. I think it's just because the way they move, you could observe them all day and just notice they're kind of like little people, just like a little bit. The way they move around and the way they collect themselves, they're hilarious.
Well, we've had so many movies and cartoons over the past 2 decades that people just love the look at them.
Exactly. Now, there has been a new addition to our penguin colony. Well, I guess multiple new additions. Now, we're used to seeing king penguins and gentoo penguins inside of Penguin Plaza, the cool pool specifically. However, we have... What are our new additions inside of here?
Well, I think the camera's got a picture of one of our newcomers right now.
What is that?
That is a macaroni penguin.
One more time?
Macaroni penguin.
Oh, wow.
We have, it just must have said hello.
Oh, hello to you.
We have 8 of them in here, and it's a great story, a really feel-good story.
Yeah.
San Diego SeaWorld has a huge bird colony with macaronis there. Macaroni penguins lay 2 eggs, and oftentimes they don't take care of both of them. So one of the eggs either has to be hand-raised or it doesn't survive. So especially in the wild, it's kind of a backup plan.
Yeah.
So what we did, they were saying that they needed some help, and we provided help and said, yeah, we'll take them. So one of our curators went out there, picked up eggs, brought them back on a commercial plane in a special incubator, and away we went. Our staff had to put in some longer hours as we were hand raising them up, but after they got to a certain point, they came out here with the rest of the birds. They were in a playpen for a little bit, and now they're out with everybody.
They're out with everyone. So you mentioned that staff helped out, of course, with raising all these little cute birds. What does that even look like?
Yeah. It starts off, I mean, they're little tiny. They're just like all other birds, no feathers at all. Very dependent on their parents, which in this case was our staff. They needed a lot of heat requirements, and as they continue to grow, they grow those feathers, and they have more and more needs. You start off with just a little tiny bit of water that you give them, and you start adding this milkshake gruel of fish and krill, and then they get more and more of that until they start getting little tiny slices of fish, which is pretty much what the parents would do, just except they're throwing it up into their baby's face. So they did a great job. Now that they're to the point where they're being hand-fed fish just like the rest of the birds, and
big kids.
They're not quite full-sized yet, but penguins have to grow quickly. You have to think out in the wild they have a very small window of I have to get to this point and fend for myself before winter comes. And so that's why they have to grow quickly. Now you will. They're called macaronis because they have a little yellow tuft of feathers.
It's very faint.
Very faint right now because they're youngsters still. So after their next year, you'll start seeing more of a plumage. And I guess macaroni was a really old 17th century term or 18th century term about being flamboyant. So they have these little flamboyant feathers that come off of their head.
So they will be super ornamented, and by the time you guys see them a year from now, you'll obviously be able to tell that is a macaroni penguin.
And you can tell now they're a little bit different from the gentoos. They're a little shorter. Their beaks are shaped a little bit differently. But the gentoo penguins also have those white tufts. They almost look like white earmuffs on the top of their head, whereas the macaroni penguins don't.
Now you also, they're not just macaroni chicks in here. They're also gentoo chicks, supposedly?
There are 2 of them in here, but your guess is as good as mine.
Where have these gentoo chicks gone?
We just talked about how difficult sometimes it is to tell the youngsters from the parents because penguins grow so quickly. So they're out there. We've taken both of the penguin playpens out of the exhibit now, and they're amongst the group. But I have no idea where they're at. They might be out there in the water swimming.
They are truly big kids now. This is amazing. Now, you mentioned, I want to go a little bit back to just this raising of these mighty 8 chicks and how staff had to help keep them warm, feed them, and protect them. How much staff and time does that take? And they've got their own other teams here on grounds and other areas to take care of.
It takes a village.
To raise a child, that's right.
Now, the majority of the feeding was done by the Penguin staff, but we actually brought in some members from other teams who are interested in getting that experience, and it also helped out. You know, when you're doing this for over a month period of time, it can be grueling when you're starting really early in the morning and going until 7, 8 o'clock at night with some of these feedings. So we did bring some other folks in to help out. So they got a great experience with raising some chicks, and everybody benefited, and obviously they did a great job. So if this happens again next year or down the road, we have the experience that we need.
That's wonderful. And this penguin colony just keeps growing and growing and growing. How many birds around can we house inside of the cool pool?
That's a great question. Right now we have over 40 gentoos in here. I think we're around 17 or 18 king penguins in here now, and of course the macaronis that we just talked about. So we could bring some more in. It would be nice to kind of decrease the size of the gentoo group and increase the size of the macaronis and the king penguins. We've even talked about possibly even a fourth species. So there's definitely more room in here, and there's room to grow.
So since there are so many different kinds of penguin species in here, are there any power dynamics? Is there a bully, a subordinate? Or are they all like, it's cool, we're fine? No sharks and jets situation inside here?
Not between the groups per se, but sometimes they get a little defensive of their area. Especially at certain times of the year. So when it comes to breeding time, they usually have a space that they don't want anybody else around. But as far as normal day-to-day, they aren't looking for trouble. In fact, you can see there's a couple of the king penguins that are just waddling through a group of gentoo penguins back there, and you know they might give each other a little, hey, what are you doing? But they're fine. Certainly no battles to injury or anything like that. So they get along pretty well.
And now one other thing, I know we've had the kings and the gentoos here for a while, so we know about, they're from those islands around Antarctica. Is it similar for the macaroni penguin, or can you find them other places?
Yeah, they can be a little bit further north too, as far as that goes, than the other two species. So the illusion that we always get from watching a lot of cartoons and movies is that penguins have to be around snow and ice and glaciers.
And polar bears sometimes.
Yeah, that's a little reminder since she just said that. Polar bears, northern hemisphere, penguins, southern hemisphere. But we get that in our heads, and that's not always the case. In fact, the Humboldt penguins, which are in our other exhibit, is a great example of a bird found in warmer weather, cold water, but warmer weather. They're found in Peru and Chile, and the temperatures may get in the 80s or 90s there.
Wow, and it's important to remember, just like all other kinds of animals and even the human species, there are so many different kinds of penguins. Like we look at a penguin, we think, all right, black and white, maybe a little yellow, but no, if you come into Hellsberg Penguin Plaza, you'll see this really cool thing back here, and it says meet the world's penguins, and you'll see they're like 17, 18 different types of penguins that we recognize out in the wild. And the macaroni penguins, we're just so glad they've decided to join us here. And we hope that we get to see them grow. And how do you think they'll get to stay here for a while after they're nice and big, at least?
I think so. You know, this is our first foray, obviously, into this group of animals. So as they grow, we'll get recommendations on bringing more in or sending some out to be breeding pairs. So it just depends on how we move forward and what the best pairings would be.
Absolutely.
So we'll be working with SeaWorld and other institutions that have those specific birds, just like we do with the king penguins and the gentoo penguins. When we first started this building out, we actually had 2 different subspecies of gentoo penguins, and since that time, those 2 groups, it's been decided to separate those out so you don't have hybrids. So some zoos and aquariums have one subspecies and some groups have another. So it's a lot, and it all has to do with genetics. So
it's a really fun part of science that we don't necessarily get to see until we see the animal right in front of us. which is delightful. And I'm so glad that we get to have these birds here. If you guys are in the Kansas City area, or you're coming to the Kansas City area, make sure you see these chicks while they're still chicks, because they will soon molt. I believe it's on their second molt.
Right, right. So they'll have this look until about next December, next January, and then they'll start getting a little bit more plumage on.
Oh, they'll be super suave. So make sure you guys come out. Thank you, Sean, for talking to us about our very cute chicks. We hope to see you out here at the zoo. Stay nice and warm this winter season. Have a wild Wednesday, everyone.